Okay, a true palate cleanser here now. Real recreational reading after months and months, 2 years, filled with MBA textbooks that are only interesting to a thin slice of the population. And I started it off with a bang. I did Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I read it in 2013, right after I finished the MBA program, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I wrote this about it in September of that year. I liked it. I did, but mostly because I enjoy the genre. In general, I have difficulty with series books. They must be astounding to compel me to move further down the road with them, and this one wasn't quite there for me. To be honest, I think the book has made me desperately want to see the show. I think this constant chapter-changing perspective is naturally suited for television and will make for an awesome show. In the text, it unfortunately pushed me toward a thin allegiance to no particular protagonist. I don't know if I need that or not, but in this book, it disappointed me. I didn't find myself disliking any characters that I initially liked, but I did find it very difficult to empathize with primary perspective characters if they had treated other first persons terribly earlier in the book. The other distressing thing to me was that the story itself felt like it had no arc, no natural build. The feeling I got throughout was that Martin was trying to get us comfortable with an unsettling and unusual rhythm so that when the book ended, however abruptly, we would continue bouncing with that disjointed, incomplete desire to the next books of the series. I am totally interested in the legions of interesting characters and the different things they will bring to the through lines as the macro story continues. I just think I'm going to pick up the visual medium instead of the written words from here. So I talked about A Game of Thrones a little bit when we reviewed Pillars of the Earth by Follett earlier, and that seemed like a better way to creatively move through first-person perspectives than the sort of episodic chapter nature of the book. But I still believe what I wrote here, and this was before I saw the show. I think it made for a fantastic show. Part of the thing that was difficult for me was when I was reading certain chapters with certain characters, in particular in the book, I wasn't really into the Daenerys character and moving through and going with the legions of the horse riding, the Khal Drogo, these folks. And those chapters felt like such a slog to me to get through them in the books. Now, I felt completely indifferent about those characters and their stories in the show, but it didn't really matter whether I liked them or not in the show because everything moved so quickly. I didn't feel like I was stuck in any of those chapters there. That thing that I talked about here too, where you have a first-person perspective of a character that did something terrible to an earlier first-person perspective that you had, was really disorienting for me because I had a really difficult time getting into that new person's perspective. It was something where I was like already set up to dislike that character, and maybe that's on purpose, but it wasn't good for me because, again, those chapters then felt slow. Those chapters felt like work, and especially reading this coming right out of the MBA program, the last thing I wanted was additional work. I wanted a page turner, and to some degree I got it here. I think the show is one of the greatest television series that's ever been made, and I think I'm really happy that it's the first book after the graduate school program because I think there's so much to talk about with A Game of Thrones. Just looking at the reviews of the people that are in my community that have read it too, most people really love it. So I would love to hear from people who went on and read other books from the series. I did not. I went directly to the show after this, and I loved the first few seasons of the show. I was voracious in going through those. That to be said, as things got a little wonky at the end in those last seasons, I stopped even watching them on HBO at the time and was just kind of picking up internet recaps because I wanted to know what was happening to the characters, but I wasn't really into the work of the show either. So I'd love to hear from people who are huge fans and maybe stuck with it all the way through the show or are also still on the ride for the books. I know it's a saga in itself, the way that Martin has gone about writing these books. And I would love to hear from people that have strong opinions about A Game of Thrones here. I loved it, and I'm a big fan of the story. The book didn't work as well for me. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. That was A Game of Thrones, A Song of Fire and Ice #1. It's the only book from these that I read in the series, but I realized that it is a great book for a lot of people. And we'll have more pop fiction and additional stories coming up in the next couple of weeks. Till then.